As a Nigerian based in Nigeria, I grew up with a lot of sport lovers, particularly football lovers. You will see boys, men, and more commonly now women chanting and supporting their favorite clubs. I was never sport inclined, whether physically, visually, or virtually. It was just not my thing. The things I did have passion for were video games, movies, and anime. I did understand one thing: people support hobbies that they are passionate about. I yearned for that too. So, growing up, my childhood was inspired by comic book characters. I think I need to mention that my favorite shows as a kid were Batman Beyond and Justice League. I did watch Marvel's Spider Man and the 1992 X Men animation, but I was more invested in DC and all they had on offer. So, in the 2010s, DC wanted to deliver quality content to rival Marvel's MCU, hence the birth of the DCU. Prior to now, DC seemed to have the upper hand in terms of audience appeal, with successful films like the Nolan's Batman trilogy, which helped redefine what superhero movies could be. However, after seeing the ever growing success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which started in 2008 with the release of Iron Man, Warner Brothers and DC then kicked off their own universe with the release of Man of Steel, a new Superman film carried by a director who seemed to have a decent streams of success and played by a talented actor on the rise. Now, what could go wrong, you wonder? Well, everything. This first universe film was divisive to say the least. It did make enough to break even, but it wasn't the success they hoped for. Still, they worked strong and made more films. The sequel to Man of Steel was Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which was a pseudo building block to introduce the Justice League characters. That movie had an even lower critic score than the previous film, with worse character motivations and less heroic tone. So the second movie was less than stellar, but that didn't stop DC. After that, they released probably the most controversial of all the films, Suicide Squad. The plot for Suicide Squad wasn't the problem. After all, it was a direct follow up after the events of BVS. Rather, criticism were directed to its very lazy character design, which was mainly towards the Joker. It did have other issues. Still, we can all agree that the movie had or gave us a very solid album. I torture you. Please don't forget. All these movies did indeed have a pattern. They all carried a very dark tone. For me particularly, I never had a problem with the dark tone, but it did become a point of contention. However, the next project was less divisive with the release of Wonder Woman. It seemed DC had hit it big with both fans and critics, with a storyline and plot that felt in line with what fans would expect. At this point, DC could breathe a sigh of relief knowing it could only get better. You see, I spoke too soon because the next film was indeed the beginning of the end for the extended universe. So in 2017, DC was rife with a lot of drama. First, the director Zack Snyder lost his daughter. DC panics, then brings in the Avengers director Josh Whedon. DC pumps extra millions into the film after investing millions into the project before. Actors being called back to reprise their roles and not being in the best of shape. These were but a few of the problems that occurred both on set and out of set. It was messy, but eventually in 2017, we would be given the true Avengers rival. And like them, it ironically took 4 years of build-up and a couple of millions in investment. It should all be worth it. For context, a movie is considered successful when it can rake in 2.5 times of its actual budget. The Justice League had a budget of 300 million and was able to make back 600 million. If you do the maths, how much do you think they lost?
What happened? What? Oh no, how terrible. That's just awful. How terrible. Oh no.
To say the films were a colossal failure would be an understatement. You see, DC seemed to learn only one lesson, which was adjusting the tone for their films to make them approachable. They did see results with the release of Aquaman, which was the only movie to reach $1 billion. From there on out, it was flop after flop after flop after flop after flop after flop after flop. It was clear the writing on the wall. It had to end, and a refresh was more necessary than ever. Reflecting on their strings of failures, they realized they needed someone to steer the ship. The question is who? Who could do it? Who would be the Feige to DC? I think I need to note that after 2018's Aquaman, there were other good films too, like Shazam in 2019 and The Suicide Squad, which was a follow up to the 2016 film. James Gunn was the brilliant mind behind the 2021's The Suicide Squad, who also happens to be the director of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy films. If I may assume, this was just perfect for the upper management over at Warner Brothers. On one hand, James Gunn has worked with both Warner Brothers and Disney, and on the other, he hasn't lost money for either of them. So they made him the new head of DC and tasked him with overseeing all projects. So what was his first course of action, or what you'd expect from him? It begins by rebranding the DCU to the DCU, which may only be looked at as a change of one letter. This is where the important bit of the topic begins. Creature Commando has finished airing on the 9th of January 2025, and this is indeed the first project for the once virgined DCU. So the question is, where does it stand? I am happy to tell you that Creature Commando is better than I expected. The first thing to have in mind, the plot itself is not complex. There is a build-up to the series finale, but it's very self-contained and not branching out to other potential films and series. The second, this is essentially the leftovers from the failed DCEU, with characters who stem from the 2021 The Suicide Squad. This is because apparently James Gunn did still intend to keep parts of the DCU as well as Elseworlds characters like the 2022 The Batman while working on newer versions of these iconic heroes. Now obviously that seems like a mess, but James found a way to make it work. It's still a bit too early to conclude with only one property. However, Creature Commando does a great job at character development, investing in all the characters on display. So yes, a new era has begun with hopefully a greater legacy than its predecessor, but only time will tell. And if you have been able to stay for this long, thanks for watching.